Hello there, Ride the Car Guy here, and today we finally get the new suspension put on the Xterra. Now real quick, before we get started, I want to let you know that down in the description, I have the tools that you need, the parts that you need, the torque specs that you need, and the time codes for this video. Also, YouTube has a fun new feature, so if you look at the progress bar of the video right here, you'll see that it's split into pieces. So if you hover over each one of those pieces, it will tell you what portion of the video that you're on. You can skip around to the different parts and get right to the install if you want to. All right, let's do this. Now, before we get into this video, I want to thank you guys. I put a poll out on my channel not too long ago, and you guys all overwhelmingly voted that I do suspension work. So this kind of pushed me to finally get this done and make this video, which is a full lift on the Xterra. Now in the past, I've done videos on like replacing the front strut or replacing the shocks in the rear, but I've never done a full instructional video on how to do a suspension replacement. So that's what this is. Now I'm pretty pumped for this because my Xterra has 317 miles on it, and it is now over 15 years old. So this is long overdue. Right now, the suspension is super sad. It's kind of saggy. When you hit the brakes, you can kind of feel it take a nosedive. When you accelerate, it kind of does a little bit of a wheelie, so to speak. And it just has a really soft and disconnected feel to it. So my expectations for this are pretty low. Of course, I'm gonna love having a lift, but I'm gonna be pretty excited just to have a much more solid and connected feel to the road. So let's head back to the garage and discuss the kit that I picked up. Now to lift my Xterra, I went with a kit from a company called All Dogs Off-Road. Now I have been researching lift kits all around the internet, but I actually came across All Dogs on the Xterra subreddit, which is an excellent resource if you haven't seen it. I linked it down below. It's awesome for people like you and me who work on our own vehicles. After talking with them, I learned that their springs and their leaf packs are made in America with American steel, which is a really big deal for me. I really like that, so I decided to go with them. Now I do have to say, All Dogs is not a sponsor of me or of this video. I did, however, receive a discount on these parts in exchange to effectively let All Dogs use this video however they see fit. Now, as you know, I've been out on my socials letting you guys know I'm making this video, and before I even started recording, I had people asking me how I chose the parts that I did for my Xterra, so I want to show you. I bought everything as one kit, so I just went to, of course, All Dogs Off-Road, and I scrolled down and I searched for everything that fits the 2nd Gen Xterra, and they have what's called the All Dogs Off-Road Complete Lift Kit with Bilstein 5100s for 2nd Gen Nissan Xterra. So if you click on that, you'll find that the base kit is about $880. This includes what's called an add-a-leaf. So literally it is one leaf that they'll send to you per pack. You have to take the pack apart, put the new leaf in, and then build it back up. My leaves are really sad, and they're just kind of sagging, and they're just definitely done. It has 146,000 miles on it. So I opted for a complete leaf pack, but you'll see that here in a minute. Looking at our options here, we can see that we have the front coilover spring, and we have two options. We have medium and we have heavy. Now, I chose medium because I don't really plan on modifying my front end. However, if you do plan on taking off the plastic bumper and replacing it with a big steel bumper or adding a winch, for instance, you may want to consider getting the heavier springs. Next option here, you'll see they have an additional body lift if you want to put that and kind of add that to your kit. They have a kit for a 1 or a 2 inch. Scrolling down, you'll see the leaf pack assembly options. So again, by default, you get what's called an add-a-leaf, and that's what ADOAAL stands for, All Dogs Off-Road, add-a-leaf. If we click that, we see we have right now one option, and so that is the full leaf pack. That's going to be the Broverland medium load leaf springs. I'm not going to put a whole bunch of extra weight in the back, so I'm not going to be loading it up with people or supplies. I'm not using a roof tent. I'm not really going to even tow with it much anymore. So I just went with regular medium springs. They also have an additional spacer plate for an extra 1/2 inch lift. And here's a big one. This one says coilover assembly. So unassembled means you're going to get just the spring and just the Bilstein shock, and then you need to take either old parts off your Xterra to reassemble it or buy new parts and get it assembled. Now, I actually ordered these unassembled to save a little money, and it was a bit of a mistake. So you'll see a little bit later in the video, I tried to build these, but it does not work out. Next, you'll have the option of adding some upper control arms. It's a good time to do it when you have all this torn apart. Then we have the U-bolt flip kit option. So in this case, they handle it with a recessed U-bolt plate. So basically it takes your U-bolts and takes them a little bit out of the way. So you gain a little bit of extra clearance on the bottom of the axle. And I actually chose this as well. Mostly because why not? You get a little extra clearance. And also my plates are looking a little rusty. So I just want to replace them and make them look good. All right, enough talk. Let's take a look at the kit itself and then get it on the truck. That of course includes the leaf packs for the rear and the springs for the front. This kit came with the Bilstein 5100s, that's those here. This is the front, that's the rear. We have some giant U-bolts there, and then some bushings, looks like for the leaf pack to go into the shackle in the rear. Also included was some camber bolts. So when you lift the car, you're gonna notice that it's gonna affect the camber just a little bit, so this will help correct that. And then that's it. That's the kit. The rest, we're just going to lift the Xterra into the sky, pull everything off, and just replace these parts. So let's go do it. All right, step one done. We have the Xterra up and the wheels off. Just two pieces of advice if you're lifting the Xterra. Make sure that you're using the two-post lift method, not the roadside method. Obviously, because we need to have that rear axle independent to be able to move around. And then also, if you don't have an impact gun, make sure you loosen your lug nuts before you lift the Xterra up. I do have a video on the Xterra. I always forget what corner. It's gonna be in one of these corners as a recommended video if you need any assistance on that. We're gonna get started on the front driver's side. No particular reason. It's just closest to me and where the camera was set up. So let's get started here. Now the first thing we wanna do is we wanna get our sway bar out of the way. To do that, we need to crack off the top sway bar link on this side and of course the other side as well. I just hit it with some PB Blaster to make it a little bit easier, but these should be 17 millimeter bolts. And you'll also notice that inside of this stud here, you have an Allen head hole that if it is too hard to get off or it starts to spin when you do get it loose, you can slide an Allen head in there, just get a regular old wrench on the outside of it, and that way you can actually back the nut off. So loosen this, pop the sway bar link out of the top, do it on the other side, and we'll be able to slide that bar down. I just grabbed a breaker bar just to crack it loose, and that made it a lot easier. So I think it's just spinning now. I can verify by grabbing a wrench. Yep, sure enough it is. When this of course happens, grab your wrench here, have that ready. Get your Allen wrench in the head there, and then just turn them in opposite directions. And then just keep doing that till it backs out. Excellent, so that's off. Looks like it's already, well, kind of loose. See if I can get this to move a little bit. All right, just cracking it a few times with my dead blow hammer. And it's pretty tight on the other side now, so what I'm gonna do is I'll just go loosen the other one, and then both should come loose and slide down. Once you pop both out of the way here, just slide it back, and this whole sway bar link slides out of the way. Now we have free access to the bolt on the bottom of the shock here, and of course, there's always been room at the top of the shock here, which is nice and easy to get to. Next, we have the three 14 millimeter bolts at the top of the assembly here, and we're just gonna loosen these. We're gonna take them most of the way out, and then we're gonna loosen the lower one. And then once everything is basically loose and we can just pull it off with our fingers, we're going to do that. Pull it off with our fingers and take the whole assembly out. Now you'll notice I took out the wheel well cover. I did that just to give you guys a better view. You should be able to get away with just leaving that on there. So let's do this. Excellent, and then last one. Oh, looks like we'll probably need a deep socket for that one. There we go. Yeah, I did need a deep socket for that one in the rear. Now let's go grab the bottom bolt. All right, this guy is a 19 millimeter. So what I'm gonna do on this is I just have a giant 19 millimeter wrench. I'm gonna put that on the nut, but I'm also just gonna use a impact on the bolt itself, mostly because I'm just feeling lazy today. But of course, if you had a 19mm socket with probably a breaker bar to get that loose and then just back it out like you normally would. Again, we're just gonna take the bolt, or excuse me, the nut off of here and leave the bolt in, so that way we can get some support underneath this knuckle and then be able to pull it out. All right, cover your ears. So that actually backed the bolt out. It went so fast. Well, that was incredibly simple. So I obviously just quickly backed that nut out. And now what you want to do is you want to get something underneath, again, this knuckle down here, the lower control arm, and we want to be able to support the weight. So that way, well, obviously when you take this out, it doesn't just fall down and put stress on everything else. So let's go grab a jack and we'll do that. So I went ahead and put my jack underneath the lower arm here. And now we're going to go ahead and unscrew all 3 of the nuts at the top. All right, there's all 3. And now this should start to feel a little loose here, hopefully. Let's see here. Let's actually drop this down a little bit. There we go. All right, needs a little bit of coaxing here. It still seems to be pretty solid. So I'm just gently pushing down. So effectively give yourself a stopper. I have it down here, it's right below the arm. I'm pushing down, so that way it takes the tension off of the assembly itself, and then pull the lower bolt out. There we go. Awesome. So now, yep, it should come loose. And then just slide it out. There you go. That's it. Now that it's out of the way, it's a good time to talk about your lower control arm bolts. When you adjust the ride height of a vehicle, you're adjusting what's called camber. And what camber is really how the wheel is tilted inside of the wheel well. If you pretend you're looking down the length of the car, you have negative camber, where the tires are kind of pointed inward, and then you have positive camber, where they're outward. Now, if raising the car is going to change that, then we can have bolts installed in the lower control arms that will help basically accommodate for that change. Now, if we're being completely honest, doing a modest lift on the Xterra is not going to dramatically change the camber, but this is the time to do it if we are going to do it, and for any future alignments, or if you're going to get it professionally aligned after you do your lift, this is definitely the time to swap out those bolts and make that lower control arm adjustable. This is achieved by, instead of having a regular round bolt, it has a bolt that is basically sheared down the side. This allows you to turn that bolt, and then it will either push the lower control arm out or pull it in to adjust the camber. So if you decide to do it, I will put the adjustments up on the screen right from the factory service manual. That way, even if you're using your actual adjustable bolts that are already in your Xterra, or you're using something like this, you can adjust it accordingly to try to get the camber to be in a good place. I would still recommend, if you are concerned about it and you're not feeling good about aligning your own wheels, I would definitely take it to a professional, as you need pretty specialist tools to make sure that everything is just perfect. I wouldn't worry, however, even if you're just gonna drive it straight to the alignment shop, it's not gonna affect it in such a way that it's gonna be dangerous to drive. It's not like we're adjusting toe in or caster or anything like that, really. It's just gonna be slightly tilted in to an almost unrecognizable degree. All right, now that we covered that, let's go ahead and get the new springs installed on the new shocks. So I was overly optimistic about swapping these springs out on my own. In the past, I have not worked with lift kits or heavy duty springs before. So I was like, hey, I can just use my regular consumer level spring compressors and I won't have a problem. Well, surprise, surprise, I had a problem. I was able to compress the spring, but the compressors literally started bending, and that is super, super sketch, and they're simply not strong enough to handle tighter springs. And if you look here, the coils on the stock spring are much further apart than the coils on the new spring. The problem with that is, once you have the consumer level compressor on here and you have it compressed and installed onto the shock, once you loosen the compressor, the little clamps literally won't come out from between the coils. So what did I do? I ran to AutoZone and I picked up a heavy duty spring compressor. Well, another problem with that is that the spring compressor, the heavy duty one, is far too large, meaning when I slid this down into place, I could not get it to align straight. And so that made me very uncomfortable because you do not want to compress a spring cockeyed, because you can shoot the thing straight out of the compressor and seriously hurt yourself potentially. So what does that mean? Well, that means I'm actually going to take my new spring, get my new shocks, and bring it to a shop and have them install it. So just one more sort of, not necessarily a pitch, but a strong recommendation that you just have whoever you order your set from, just pre-assemble them, have them come, and then you can just swap them out nice and easy on the front end. All right, it is now a full week later and I finally have these things assembled. Here's what ended up happening. I had to, of course, buy the new rubber top mount pieces because you, of course, don't want to reuse your old ones because in my case, they're 16 years old. Also, I wanted to buy new top mounts because mine were kind of rusty and I didn't want to reuse them. So I had to order those parts. They aren't just sitting on the shelf at some place. The top mounts were $60 for the pair. Then the, of course, rubber insulators and all the bushings and such were $30 for the pair. And then I had to go get the springs compressed by professionals, if you want to call them that, and they charged me $70. Yes, that is 70 to simply squeeze two little springs, slide this shock through, and screw on the top. I kid you not. So after an entire week and spending quite a bit of money, I finally got these back and they're ready to go on the front of the Xterra and I could not be more excited. All right, so let me go change my glove and then we can install these. All right, we're ready to put this sucker back in. So make sure you have the lower mount bolt available and at least one nut for the top mount. Make sure they're easily accessible. I'm just gonna set them on the floor here. And then I'm going to grab the entire assembly. Now, since it's really just the strength of the spring that's going to create our new ride height, the entire assembly is not really any bigger than the original one. The only thing we need to be cognizant of is that this notch in the spring perch here needs to be facing the outside of the vehicle. And then on the top, you're going to see a little triangle, and well, it's just an arrow, and that needs to be pointing to the inside of the vehicle. So this will help you avoid having to twist it once it's in here to get it installed. So now that we know how we're going to put it in, let's go ahead and slide it in. Just take the bottom, put it between the tie rod end and in front of the mount, and then you should have just enough room to slide the top mount in. Get all those bolts aligned. There we go. Awesome. So now I'm just going to very loosely spin on one of the nuts at the top mount. There we go. So that way it won't fall out. We can play with it. And then grab your lower bolt. Then all we need to do is just push down. I'm just pushing down on the brake disc. And then it pushes our lower mount down and line up that hole. Once it's lined up, slide that bad lad in. Awesome. Good. I'm just gonna grab a dead blow, keep pushing down, and just gently tap it in there. So I'm gonna grab the nut for the lower mount and just, again, just slide it on with your fingers as much as you can. And then we'll worry about tightening it down later. We just don't want it to slide out. Back up top, I can go finger tighten all of the other nuts. Next, take your 14mm ratchet again. And then I'm just gonna get these most of the way down. Now that we have those in, we can just grab our torque wrench, and really I'm going to end up using two torque wrenches for this. For the top bolts, they need to go in at 22 foot-pounds, so I have just a regular kind of standard torque wrench, and then I have a giant one for the lower shock mount because the lower shock mount needs to go in at 155 foot-pounds. So let's knock all four of those bolts out and get them down to spec. Woo! Once those are all torqued down to spec, we just need to grab our little sway bar. So grab your link, make it available, and remember, make sure you're doing this on the other side as well. So swing it out of the way, and then get your sway bar back up here. and slide that bolt through. Just kind of have to maneuver it back and forth until it sort of feeds its way through there. All right, before you tighten this down, just make sure you go to the other side and do the same thing, so that way they're both fed through and you don't have to worry about loosening this one back up and moving it around to get that other side in correctly. Then we can grab our nut here, get it on, put it on as much as it will go with the regular ratchet, and then we'll have to start using our Allen wrench method with a regular old wrench. So once you get to a certain point, it will pinch itself and it will stop rotating. So when that happens, you can get this down to 62 foot-pounds. All right, now that we have this all finished up in the front, it's looking absolutely awesome. And we can get this all buttoned up and then move over to the rear. Before you do that though, notice, of course, if you have the Xterra up and all four wheels are off, you might as well rotate your tires. So I'll throw some common patterns up on the screen, and it's just a good time to do it if all of the wheels are off anyways. All right, let's move to the rear and get this job done. Now, before we can access the rear suspension, we're gonna wanna remove our spare tire. It's just gonna give us a lot more room and it's gonna be easier to work with. So what you need to do is go grab the tools out of your jack, which if you've never used it before, is gonna be under your rear seat, under a flap of carpet. Just take the jack out and just pull all the tools away. And this is what we're gonna use to lower the spare tire. There is a slot underneath your rear tailgate between the bumper and the tailgate. And what you have here is a little tool with a little T on the top, and you can slide that in, and you're gonna kind of feel it connect to where you can't turn it left and right anymore. Once that's in there, there's just a little extender if you wanna use that. You can grab your tire iron, and there's a little square cut in to the handle. Slide that in here and start turning. Now left is going to drop the tire, and then right is going to, of course, bring it back up. I'm being kind of lazy, so I'm just gonna grab a drill and make it go down faster. All right, pull that tool out, and now we go down below, and we just gotta pull that little retaining clip out of the tire and we can slide it out. Excellent. This is also a really good time to do any service on that tire that needs to be done. For instance, mine needs to be filled up with air. So it's a little soft. I'm gonna fill it back up to spec. Just clean it up as well before it goes back up underneath the back of the X. Now that that's clear and out of the way, let's go under and start taking those leaf springs off. Now the rear should be as easy as just unbolting everything and bolting it back up. So we're gonna get started on these U-bolts. So grab yourself an 18mm socket and a breaker bar, and we'll pull those off. Excellent. Take your plate and your other U-bolt, set that aside, and then we're going to attack the front mount here. Now for the front support, we have a 19mm bolt, and we have a larger nut on the other side. I have a 21mm socket, and that didn't fit. So I'm just going to grab my trusty adjustable. I know people tend to hate these things, but it does a pretty decent job for me. So I'm going to take the, of course, breaker bar on the front, put my adjustable on the rear, and break this thing loose. All right, for all my friends in the north, go ahead and close your eyes. This next part might be hard to watch. All right, that's it. Now we just go ahead and grab our wrench from the other side and then back it out. Once you have it loose enough, should spin right off. Awesome. Set that aside, but leave the bolt in so it supports the front end. And then when we release the rear, we can just drop the whole leaf in a controlled manner. Now in the rear, we have two 17mm nuts on the left side. And you can just kind of pull your bumper cover away and just pull these out. You don't have to worry about any like removal of wheel well covers or anything crazy like that. Just get in there, take both those off, and then the shackle will slide out towards the inside of the vehicle. And now we're going to remove this plate here. There we go. And now what I'm gonna do is take the front bolt out, let it sit on the ground, and then I'm gonna kind of maneuver this shackle because it's gonna be tough to get out. I'll just grab like a little pry bar and kind of wiggle it out. All right, perfect. So the front is down. Now I'm gonna go work that shackle out. I just have a pry bar here, and I'm gonna work on prying this out. Once you sort of break it loose, you should be able to slide the shackle out, and then the whole thing will come off. Excellent, there we go. So I'm just gonna take this, set it aside, and then we're gonna go ahead and take the shock out. All right, next up, we're gonna deal with our lower shock bolt. Now, before you do that, make sure you have a jack and it's supporting the differential. We wanna make sure that when we start basically removing everything that's supporting that axle, that we have, well, support. This is gonna be a 19 millimeter on both sides. So I'm just gonna grab a big wrench, and then I'm gonna grab my impact gun and just take that off. So we can very, very gently pull that out. All right, all that's left is this guy up here. This is gonna be a 17 millimeter, and you just back that out and the whole shock will come off. Excellent, with that loose, should be able to kind of maneuver this around. There we go, awesome. Now that we have both leafs out, you can see just how sad my old springs were and just how good the new ADO springs are. The increase in arch is significant. If you look at them kind of laterally, then you can see that the ADO springs just have a lot more arch to them, and the actual leaves themselves are much, much thicker and look a lot stronger. I'm super excited to get these things installed, so let's keep going. Now before we can move on, we need to prep our new leaf springs. So when these were shipped to me, they were shipped literally just like this. So we have, of course, all of our shipping labels up here, and then we have a little bit of saran wrap around one end, making sure that bushing is protected. So first and foremost, make sure you take your shackle off your old leaf spring. We're gonna reuse that. And then we're just gonna remove these. And then we're going to get our new bushings, which also came in the kit, grease them up and push them in here to get it reconnected to the car. Excellent, that's ready to rock. So now I'm gonna grab my bushings and get some grease on them. Once you have those greased up, go ahead and push them into the slot that's open, the open side. It's gonna be the rear there. Awesome. So now that's all we need to do. With the leaf packs prepped, we can turn our attention to the mounting plates. Now I went with the ADO recess plate, but you can use your stock plate if you want. The only difference is if you want to use your stock plate, you will have to modify these because the U-bolts are bigger, but we'll talk about that in a second. What's nice about these plates is that you'll see the bottom of each plate will fit onto the bottom of the leaf pack. But what that means is your stock plate will sit like this, and then your modified plate will sit like this. What that's going to allow is for the U-bolts and the nuts to be tucked away on the side of the leaf pack as opposed to below it. As you can see, that's going to increase your clearance underneath your leaf pack. If you have the ADO recessed plates, then just go ahead and head to the next step where we actually start the install. If you have your stock plates and you're going to use these, I will go ahead and show you how you can modify them and make them fit the new U-bolts. Okay, to do that, I bought a high-speed steel step bit and just some lubricating oil. So I'm just going to lubricate this a little bit. There we go. And then we're going to drill these out until, until the U-bolt fits through. All right, that was easy. There's one. We're just going to keep going until we have all four done, and then we got to go repeat it on the other brace. Excellent. So we'll see if these fit through. Yes. So now they fit through. Make sure they fit on both sides. Excellent. Now, whether you opted to buy the new plate or to modify your stock plate, we're now ready to get the leaf spring back onto the X. So let's do that next, and then we'll take the axle and marry it to the leaf spring. So we're going to take our shackle and we can slide it in the lower one first. There we go. Get that all through there. Awesome. And now, bring it up, slide it over, slide that. There we go. Perfect. Get that to slide in. It's a little cockeyed here. Let me straighten it out. So it's in place. It's pushing this bushing out a little bit, but that's okay. When the plate gets on there and we kind of bring that nut back in, it'll push it back in for us. Speaking of, that's what we're going to do next. So we're going to grab our plate and just slide it on here. All right. There we go. See, just pushing it with the plate on it did it. So get the nuts on, finger tight. There we go. So we've located it. So now we're going to go up to the front and we'll slide the bolt through the front. Doing that should be nice and easy. We just lift it up, slide our bolt in. There we go. Awesome. And then again, we'll just take the nut on the other side, finger tighten it. As you can see, there's a significant gap between the axle and the leaf spring. So what we need to do is just get those a little bit closer together before we put our plate on. How we're going to handle that is, of course, just lowering the axle as much as we can without putting any undue stress on anything connected to the axle itself. So we're ready to start lowering, but you're going to see that there is a sort of guide pin in the leaf pack itself. So as we're lowering this, we just want to get that as close as we can, just by kind of gently maneuvering the axle as it gets closer, and then you kind of see it pop into place. There we go. So we lowered it. Let's see if we can slide it in place here. There we go. Awesome. So I lowered it enough just so they touch. So we're in a really good place here. And then if they get, if they get this close, you know for sure the guide pin's in, but just double check, look between the axle and the leaf pack and make sure that that guide pin slid into the hole inside the mount on the axle. Now when your axle is this low, make sure there's room in the lines that are connected to the axle, and make sure you can kind of wiggle them, that they're not under a bunch of strain. You don't want to do any damage and make more work for yourself. Once all that's in place, we're ready to take our U-bolts. I already had that one installed, but push them over the axle here. They might require a little coaxing here. There we go. Once you have those in place, grab your plate and start lining everything up. All right, so it looks like the plate is a little bit wider than stock. So you want to grab your U-bolts. You may need a little extra room on both sides. So you'll see that it won't really line up exactly with the kind of grooves or the worn away paint that the stock U-bolts did. Now the U-bolt that's closer to the inside, closer to the diff, slides through the plate just fine. This one seems to be just a little bit like too wide or something. Let me see. Yeah, almost like they need to be squeezed together a little bit. Okay, so I think maybe it won't fit because I had to sort of force it down over the axle and kind of hammer it in place. And that may have just kind of widened it a little bit, like spread it out. So what I'm going to do is think of a way to kind of squeeze these together to get the plate to slide on. All right, here's what I came up with. This is of course, just a ratchet strap sort of tie down. And what we're going to do is we are going to wrap it around the U-bolt and twist it on one side to tighten them and kind of bring them together so we can slide this plate on without issue. So let's do that. So I just tied it around. And what I'm going to do is actually take one of my old U-bolts and I'm going to start twisting this. Yeah, that should work. Yeah, see that? Huh, all right. So that's what we're gonna do. So I'm going to twist this, kind of cinch these down. Now let's see if they slide on. Oh, like a glove. Look at that. Wow. So now I can untwist them, and honestly, it'll probably hold it in place. Yep. Ooh, that is really handy. That worked out very well. So now that we are in a good place and we have the plate on, grab your washers and your nuts, and then just get those on here so it holds everything into place. Now that we know it isn't gonna fall out, there is a bolt and a nut that go through the bottom of the leaf pack, and we just want to get this aligned with it. So I'm just going to gently tap, and then just tap everything into place. And what I'm going to do is, of course, just spin those nuts all the way up so it holds everything in place. Now I'm just going to do some light adjusting to my U-bolts. Make sure they're actually vertical. Here we go. Excellent. So this kind of sits freely. Very good. Awesome. Everything is aligned. Everything is in place. Things are looking really, really good. Again, I made sure that my U-bolts are nice and vertical. They're not cockeyed or kind of tilted in any way. The plate is nice and flat up against the leaf spring. And of course, the axle and the mount are now sitting nice and flush with the leaf pack. Now for these, we can actually spin these down to spec, and you want to do it in a diagonal pattern. So kind of opposite sides diagonally, and then get them all down to 53 foot-pounds. And to make sure it's all even, you want to measure the amount of bolt that's sticking through the nut. And so it needs to be within a 3 mm margin all the way around. So we can do this before putting all the weight back on it because there's no rubber bushings. However, for the front mount and the rear mount, and if you were doing the lower control arm bolts, you want to tighten everything down in what they call an unladen state, meaning the Xterra is sitting on the ground with its own weight, with the proper amount of gas, no extra weight in the car, everything in its right place, and then you tighten everything down to spec, and you do that so you don't put any undue pressure on your bushing. So if we were to tighten everything down right now to spec and then drop the Xterra, well, it's going to put a bunch of pressure at all times on your bushings. And then it'll get even worse when you go over bumps. And not only will you get things like squeaking at a minimum, but at a worst, you can damage all your bushings. So let's get these down to spec, and then we'll get our shock in, and then that's pretty much it. We'll put everything back on, we'll drop it down and tighten up all the bolts. So I'm just going to grab a quick measurement here and make sure they're looking good. All right, so I have between 12 and 14 millimeters sticking out past all of the nuts, so I am in really good shape. Let's go grab our shock and finish up this job. Now with our new rear shock, there really isn't any prep work to do. Really just all you want to do is make sure that this top mount up here has a little bit of grease on it for that rubber bushing, and then we just want to slide this into place. So it has to go on the inside of your sway bar link. Just get that tucked in there. Kind of slide that into place. Awesome. Let's see if we can get a little extra room here. There we go. Awesome. And now, just give that a gentle little love tap there. And now, grab your washer and your nut. And again, just finger tighten this. We're going to tighten everything again once we lower it back down. For our lower bolt, we may have to kind of manhandle this a little bit. Push it in place. There we go. Just give it a good push. There. So really you just got to compress it with your hand and just slide that into place. Just enough so your threads get through the other side. And then you can spin that nut on. There we go. And once that spins on, you can push a little bit further. There you go. Now it's in place. And get that all the way finger tightened and just position that bolt. Excellent. So now we have our leaf in place. We have our shock in place. Everything's finger tightened except for, of course, the U-bolts themselves, which are fully torqued down. And for me, I ended up between about 12 and 14 millimeters of U-bolts sticking out through the nuts. And so now all you have to do is just repeat this on the other side. Once you have the other side done, the last thing we need to do is just get this axle raised up a little bit so we can put our tire back on. Now we want to raise this just enough to get these tires on, because what we're going to end up doing is dropping it all back down and then tightening up all of our bolts to spec. When you lowered your axle to reposition it on top of the leaf spring, your jack may have shifted, so just be really careful. You want to make sure it's realigned safely underneath that diff, and then we're just going to lift this up with enough space to put the tires on. All right, let's see if that's enough. Excellent. Now that this is in place, go ahead and grab your lug nuts, throw them on here, and either throw them on with an impact, or if you don't have one, just get them tight with a tire iron and then put them down to spec once you get this back on the ground. So the moment we've all been waiting for. Let's make sure that we have all of the tools out of the way from underneath the truck, get everything kind of shifted away, make sure you haven't forgotten to put any bolts in or any nuts on, and that, of course, if you were doing the front and you left the tires off, of course, put the tires on the front as well. So we are at the point where we're going to go ahead and lift on the differential, which I've already done, and I'm going to go ahead and take out my rear jack stands. This is the first time we're going to see it kind of under its own weight with the new increased ride height. I'm super, super excited. So I'm just going to do them both. I'm going to lift up the back, pull out my rear jack stands, then I'm going to go ahead and lift up the front and pull the jack stands from the front as well. Let's do it. Go very slowly on this. There we go. Oops. So there we are. Amazing. Gee, do you think I'm going to have to go tire shopping? So although we are incredibly close, we are not done yet. So we just need to go into the back end and tighten everything down to spec. So there's a lot of bolts and a lot of different specs. So I'm just going to go ahead and give you an image and just show you all the specs and all the sizes right away. Once those are all done, we're going to go give this sucker a test drive. So I'm out driving it for the first time and my initial reaction is just, wow, this thing drives like a completely new truck. Before you even start driving, obviously because of the lift, when you're getting into it, it just feels a little bit differently. You have to climb up just a little bit higher, but everything about it has changed. You feel a lot more connected to the road because everything's a bit tighter. Man, even steering, turning, everything is just tightened up so much. I guess you don't realize, you kind of get used to it over time. You just don't realize how bad or how sad your suspension really is, especially if you have one like mine, where it's an older Xterra and it just has a ton of miles on it. It's just night and day. I love the new stance. However, we're definitely gonna have to go tire shopping. As you can see, it's of course higher. We expected that, about 2 to 2.5 inches, but it really does change the look. It has a much more aggressive stance, but that also means a lot more space in the wheel wells, right? So we're gonna wanna go ahead and pick up new tires for this, and I don't know, maybe it's time for new rims. We'll figure something out, but either way, I love the way it looks. I love the way it drives. I could not be happier with this install. And speaking of the install, I'm not gonna lie, this was not a walk in the park. This was not a super easy install, but on the other hand, the actual parts or the physical install itself was not really the source of a lot of my pain. The main problem I ran into was really getting the front coilovers built. It was a surprising pain in the butt to get finished. I spared all of you the details, but it took, again, over a week. I had to go buy a bunch of new parts. It just ended up being kind of a nightmare. So it was, that was really the worst part of it all. I would say the only other difficulty would come from not having the right tools. So take a look in the description below. I put the full list of tools that I used, and there's quite a few. Not everyone has up to 22 millimeters in sockets and torque wrenches that go up to 150 foot-pounds. Also, if you're modifying your own leaf spring plate, then you need a step bit. Those aren't super common for people to have, but that high-speed steel step bit that I bought, that bit alone was 50 bucks. But I have to say, though, it was absolutely worth it. The pain and the annoyance of getting those front struts built and having to buy a couple extra tools just didn't make a difference to me now that I'm driving in it and I feel the way it feels now. If you are interested in the kit that I bought or something similar, go ahead and check out the description below where I put a link to the All Dogs Off-Road website. Also in the comments below, let me know, did you install a lift kit? What one did you go with? What difficulties did you have? And of course, as always, in the comments, give me any questions you have. I'll do my best to answer them. I want to thank you all so much for watching. This has been quite an adventure. Be sure to subscribe for more content like this, and I'll see you in the next one.